Look at any group of children in Britain. You'll see dark children and fair children. They will have brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes. This boy has got wavy brown hair. He's got straight blonde hair. She's got red hair. Where does all this variety come from? Who are the British?
The ancestors of modern British people came from across the sea. Different groups of people came to these islands from the continent of Europe. The first people came over 300,000 years ago, but we don't know very much about those ancient Britons. About 400 BC, a group of people called Celts came to Britain from what is now Belgium, over there. Then, in 43 AD, the Romans came. The Romans didn't conquer the whole of Britain. They built a lot of towns and cities and roads like this one. The Romans built good straight roads, and we still use them today.
The Romans landed here at Richborough in Kent. I asked some pupils from a local school to tell me about the Romans in Britain.
They built straight roads and they built many towns and cities in Britain.
Did they conquer the whole of Britain?
No, they didn't conquer Scotland. They built a wall to keep the Scots out because they caused them trouble.
What was the wall called?
Hadrian's Wall.
How long did the Romans stay in Britain?
They stayed in Britain for about 360 years.
And when did they leave?
They left in AD 410.
Why did the Romans leave?
They left because tribes from Germany attacked the empire and the emperor needed them.
What happened to Britain after the Romans left?
The Angles and Saxons invaded Britain.
Where did the Angles and Saxons come from?
They came from parts of northern Europe.
What do you know about the Angles and Saxons?
They were tall and they had fair hair and blue eyes.
The name England comes from the word Angle land.
The Anglo-Saxons conquered the whole of England, and they pushed the Celts into Ireland, Scotland and Wales. 400 years later, new invaders from Denmark and Norway attacked the countries of Europe. These were the Vikings. The Vikings conquered northeast England and Scotland. The Vikings were tall, and a lot of them had blonde hair or red hair. A lot of people in Scotland today have got red hair. They are the descendants of the Vikings. The last invasion of Britain was in 1066. In that year, the Normans from France attacked England. The battle took place here, near Hastings. The battle started at 9 o'clock in the morning and it lasted till the evening. There were about 7,000 men on each side. The English army was up there, on top of the hill, and the Normans were down there. The Normans weren't in a very good position. All day they attacked the English, but the English soldiers pushed them back. Then the Norman Duke, William, had a good idea. Into the air. The English king, Harold, looked up. And that wasn't a good idea, because he got an arrow in his eye. The Normans won the Battle of Hastings, and Duke William of Normandy became King of England. The Battle of Hastings was the last invasion of Britain. But over the centuries, people from many European countries came to Britain. They came from Russia, Poland, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Cyprus, and many other countries. Often, they were refugees from wars and revolutions on the continent.
Today, Britain is a multiracial country. In the 1950s and 60s, people from other continents came to live in Britain. Their children were born here. What do today's young Britons know about their family history?
My father's from Ireland and he was born in Dublin and moved to England when he was a child. My mum was born in England, but her mother was born in Ireland. Both my dad's parents come from Ireland, and I was born in England, in Oxford.
Were you born in Britain, Mahan?
No, I was born in Iran.
When did you come to Britain?
I came to Britain with my family 2.5 years ago.
And where do your family come from?
They're all from Iran, but different parts.
Which parts are they from?
My mother comes from the north, and my dad's from the south, so they both speak different languages, different dialects.
When did you learn English?
During the 2.5 years which I've been staying in this country.
But did you know any English before you came to Britain?
No.
Were you born in Britain, Charlotte?
Yes, I was. I was born in Birmingham.
But you've got an American accent.
When I was very young, only about 6 months, my family moved to America.
And when did they come back to Britain?
About 1.5 years ago.
Which part of America did you live in?
Well, I lived in Texas for a year, and then I moved up north to Pennsylvania.
Are your parents from Britain?
Well, my father was born in Northern Ireland, and my mother was born in Yorkshire.
Where were you born, Jessica?
I was born in Zambia, and I came to England about 10 months ago. And my parents are here studying. My father studying agriculture and my mother studying teaching. And my parents are both English, but they were both born in Africa.
This boy has got wavy brown hair. She's got red hair.
They were tall and they had fair hair and blue eyes.
Well, I lived in Texas for a year.
The Romans landed here at Richborough in Kent.
And I came to England about 10 months ago. They didn't conquer Scotland.
When did they come back to Britain? The English army was up there. And the Normans were down there. The Normans weren't in a very good position. That wasn't a good idea.
My mum was born in England.
When there's an accident in the street or in someone's home, we call an ambulance. But what do you do when there's an accident at sea or in the mountains? Well, the Royal Air Force has a special search and rescue service. When a ship sinks or if someone falls down a cliff, search and rescue will be there to help. I visited the search and rescue at RAF Valley in North Wales. As I was approaching the airfield, I saw one of their yellow helicopters. It was just taking off. When I arrived, Flight Lieutenant John Evans was waiting for me. We went inside and he introduced me to the other members of the crew.
OK, Tom, yes, this is the operations room, and these are the other two members of the search and rescue crew today. Flight Lieutenant Phil Boothby, the navigator,
Hello, Phil.
and
Nice
Flight
to see you.
Sergeant Sean Eckberg, who's the winchman.
Hello, Sean. Nice to see you. Right, John, well, you're the pilot, aren't you?
Yes.
And what do you do?
It's my job to get out, start the aircraft, and then fly us to the incident, whatever it may be, at which point Phil takes over, effectively in control of the aircraft as the navigator.
Yes, I'm the navigator, so I would be involved in navigating the airplane to and from the incident. And then when we get on scene, I'll operate the winch.
And the winchman, that's Sean, isn't it? You're the winchman. What do you do?
Once we're at the scene of the job, I am winched out of the aircraft down to the survivor, where I do whatever I need to do to the casualty to bring them to the aircraft and then on to safety.
That sounds very dangerous.
We try to get rid of all the risks.
I see. And what happens then when a call comes in?
Well, the first thing that we know is that the telephone rings and one of the crew will answer the phone. And when he realises that it's a scramble, he presses the scramble button so that everybody else on the unit knows that we've got a call out.
Now, the scramble button, what's that?
The scramble button is this small button over here, which rings bells all through the hangar and all around this unit so that all the other aircrew and the ground crew know that we've got to scramble.
So the scramble bell tells everybody that there is an incident?
Yes, that's right.
Now, what happens when you hear the scramble bell? What do people do?
When the scramble bell goes, the first thing that happens is the pilot will start putting his kit on and go out to start the helicopter. Sean, the winchman, will start preparing whatever kit he needs to take with him. And I, as the navigator, will take down rough details of where the job is, what the sort of incident is, and then start putting some lines on a map so that we can work out very roughly how far we have to go and how long it's going to take us, where is the nearest hospital, that sort of thing. And then Sean and I will put our kit on and go out and join John in the helicopter.
And how long does all of that take?
Theoretically, in daytime, we're allowed up to 15 minutes to get everything rolling and off the ground. In practice, it can take as little as 5.
It's 5 minutes?
5 minutes, yes.
It's very fast.
We try to be.
It can be very cold in a helicopter, so the crew wear special suits like this one. It's called an immersion suit. It's very heavy, and it isn't very comfortable. But it can save your life if you fall in the water. The crew wear special helmets too, like this one. I asked John about helicopters.
What kind of helicopter is this?
OK, this is a Wessex helicopter. It's been around for about 30 years now.
30 years old?
Yes, quite old, proven design.
How fast can it go?
It's usually about 120 knots, which is nautical miles an hour. We're thinking they're about 2 miles per minute in a normal cruise.
What's that in ordinary miles an hour?
In ordinary miles an hour, it works out at about 138 miles an hour, or 228 kilometres an hour.
How many people can it carry?
Normally, we would restrict it to 10 to 12, but in extreme circumstances, 16.
Up to 16? Yeah. What kind of engines has it got?
We've got 2 gas turbine, effectively jet engines, powering the aircraft.
2 jet engines?
Yep.
Very
We went back to the operations room.
Yes.
While we were having a cup of tea, the telephone rang. Phil answered it.
Hello, 22 Squadron Ops.
It was an incident.
Yeah, okay. Job. Oh, excuse me.
John ran out of the room
Okay.
as Phil pressed the scramble button and a loud bell rang.
Yeah, and the incident, please. Okay, do they...
While Phil was writing down the details, John got his life jacket and helmet.
What have we got then, Phil?
We've got 2 people cut off by the tie.
And then, while Phil and Sean were studying the map,
Got to get to the fairly quickly.
he ran to the helicopter and climbed in.
Going on? Yes, we're on our way. Okay.
While Phil and Sean were putting on their suits and helmets, John started the engines. We ran to the helicopter. We climbed in. Sean closed the door and we took off. While we were flying to the scene, we looked for the people. As the helicopter was hovering over the cliffs, I saw them. A girl and a boy. They were waving to us. They were sitting near the bottom of the cliff. They were all right, but the tide was coming in fast. The helicopter stopped at the top of the cliff, and we lowered the winchman. As he was going down, Sean gave signals to the navigator, Phil. Phil was watching Sean, and he was holding the winch cable too. Sean reached the two people. He put the harness round them. Then he gave another signal, and we moved away from the cliff. It's dangerous near the cliffs, because the wind can blow the helicopter or the people against them. When we were hovering over the sea, we lifted the winchman and the two young people into the helicopter. When everyone was safely in the helicopter, we flew back to the airfield. Two more people now owed their lives to the brave men of search and rescue. Phil was watching Sean. It was just taking off. They were sitting near the bottom of the cliff. They were waving to us. While we were having a cup of tea, the telephone rang. As he was going down, Sean gave signals to the navigator. Then he gave another signal, and we moved away from the cliff. Sean closed the door, and we took off. What's the climate like in your country? Hot? Cold? Wet? Dry? What makes a climate?
Why, for example, are some parts of the world wetter than others? In Britain, the west coast is the wettest part. This waterfall is in Wales. There's a lot of water here in Wales because it rains a lot here. But why? The prevailing wind in Britain is from the west. And out there, to the west, is the Atlantic Ocean. The wind from the ocean is a very wet wind. The air is very warm and it can hold a lot of water. This warm, wet wind comes in and it meets the hills. And when it meets the hills push the air up. But up in the hills, it's colder, and the air can hold less water. Clouds form, and the water falls as rain. So there are a lot of lakes here in Wales. These lakes make Wales one of the most beautiful parts of Britain. And every year, thousands of tourists come here for sailing and fishing. These lakes also provide a lot of the water for the towns and cities in England, where the climate is drier. Rain is also good for grass, and grass is good for sheep.
Here, in Kent, on the east coast of England, we're further away from the Atlantic Ocean. The climate here is much drier. The wind from the west loses most of its rain over Wales and western England, so we get less rain here. The most important crop in this part of Britain is wheat. Wheat needs a warm, dry climate.
There are vineyards here too. And because the southeast of England is the driest and sunniest part of Britain, it's one of the most popular places for summer holidays. But of course, the British weather is very unpredictable.
Look at these houses. They're made of wood. You won't see buildings like these in Wales. But not everything is better here in the east. It's drier and sunnier, but the weather here is often worse in the winter.
Over there is Russia. When the wind blows from the east, it doesn't come from the warm Atlantic. It comes from the ice and snow of Siberia. You did a project on farming recently, didn't you?
Yeah.
What things did you find out?
Well, we found out that farming is quite a difficult thing and it depends a lot on the weather.
Can you tell me more about that? How does it depend on the weather?
Well, if it's very hot, so it's not so good for the crops. And if it rains too much, it's not so good either. So you need exactly a good amount of everything.
What did you find out in your project, Lisa?
Well, we found out about the crops and where they grew best, and also which animals, whether they're better in wet circumstances or drier.
Can you give me some examples of animals that like wet climates?
Well, the cows are normally kept in wet climates because of the grass, like good quality grass.
They grow different crops in different parts of Britain. Did you learn something about that?
Yeah. Well, most of England's weather comes from the west, from the Atlantic. And usually it hits the mountains, the Pennines, and it rains on the western side. And on the eastern side it's less wet, so they grow more crops on the eastern side than what they grow on the west side.
What kind of crops do they grow in eastern Britain?
Well, maize, barley, wheat, oats.
And why do they grow those crops in eastern Britain?
Because it's quite dry there and it's good for harvesting.
What kind of farms are there in the west of Britain?
Or dairy farms and cattle and sheep.
Britain had its warmest winter for 100 years in 1989 and the worst storms for 300 years in 1987. Is our climate changing? I went to the Hadley Centre for Climate Research. What's happening to our climate?
Some people believe that our climate is changing and that the Earth is getting warmer.
Why?
Mild and dry winters and a hot summer, and in the last 3 years we have had 2 very severe storms in the south of England. Globally, the surface temperature of the Earth has risen by about ½ a degree in the last century, and 8 out of the last 10 years have been the warmest on record.
Why is all this happening?
The climate is affected by many factors. Natural changes in volcanoes, and in the oceans, and in the sun's heat can affect climate. But many people believe that we are changing climate by adding gases called greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. These gases come from things like power stations, factories and cars, and they trap heat in the atmosphere.
What will happen if the Earth's temperature rises?
The ice at the North Pole will probably melt and sea level will rise. This will flood many parts of the world, and some Pacific islands may well disappear altogether.
If our climate is changing, it will be more serious for the east than the west. The land here is flatter and lower. If the sea level rises, most of this land will disappear under the sea. And then, a wet valley in Wales will be a better place to be.
The Earth is getting warmer.
Why, for example, are some parts of the world wetter than others?
The climate here is much drier. We're further away from the Atlantic Ocean.
The air can hold less water.
But not everything is better here in the east. The weather here is often worse in the winter.
It will be more serious for the east than the west.
On the eastern side, it's less wet.
The west coast is the wettest part. The southeast of England is the driest and sunniest part of Britain.
Britain had its warmest winter for 100 years in 1989 and the worst storms for 300 years in 1987. The most important crop in this part of Britain is wheat.
I eat chicken pie or fish and chips or sandwiches, pasta or sweets, but I prefer Japanese food.
I don't like English food because the English people here, they have one problem. They have good food, but they don't know how to cook. And so it's not very good. So I had every day potatoes in every meal. And I like more change, rice, noodles, and something like that.
Well, that wasn't very encouraging. But what is British food really like? Well, here's the restaurant. Let's find out. Lasagna, pizza, spaghetti bolognese. This isn't British. It's Italian. Ah, at last, a fish and chip shop. Now that's British. Now, what have they got? Haddock, cod, fish cakes, steak and kidney pie, and chips, of course. Cod, I think. Cod and chips, please.
Thank you. With salt and vinegar.
Just salt, please.
Thank you. Wrap to eat them now.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And a can of lemonade, please.
Thank you. £1.70 serve, please.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not bad. Not bad at all. But surely this isn't the only British food you can find. Well, this is where you find real British food, in the home. So what about a traditional British meal?
Cottage pie!
Well, your mum's out, so I'll cook it.
You're not a very good cook. I'll make it.
Oh, all right. Well, what do we need to make cottage pie?
Meat, onions,
Potatoes.
carrots.
That's right, we need some meat, some onions, some potatoes, and some carrots. Now, let's have a look in the cupboard. What have we got? Well, we've got a few potatoes, but we haven't got any onions or any carrots.
We haven't got any meat either.
Okay, well, it's off to the shops. So, we need some minced beef. Could I have a pound of minced beef, please?
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks very much. And we need some carrots and some onions. Phew, look at that lot. Did you know that in a year, the average British family buys 568 bottles of milk, 144 pots of yoghurt, 173 pounds of meat, 26 jars of jam and marmalade, 30 tins of peas, 128 packets of biscuits, 322 loaves of bread, 576 eggs, 482 pounds of potatoes, 102 bars of chocolate.
Now, for cottage pie you need 1 pound or half a kilo of minced beef, 2 onions, 3 carrots, 250 millilitres or half a pint of water, 2 pounds or a kilo of potatoes, a little flour, a little butter, a few herbs, a little oil, some grated cheese, salt and pepper. First take a knife, peel the potatoes and cut them up. the potatoes in a saucepan with some water and a little salt, and boil them for about 20 minutes. Now peel and slice the onions and carrots. Put a little oil in the frying pan. Add the onions. And fry them gently until they are soft. Now add the meat and the carrots. And cook for a further 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, add the herbs, the flour, the water, and the salt and pepper to the mixture. When the mixture is boiling, pour it into a dish. When the potatoes are cooked, drain them. Mash them. Spread the potato over the mixture. Place After 25 minutes, sprinkle the grated cheese on and cook for a further 5 minutes. Away the pie. Delicious.
It's very good, Jenny. Much better than I could do. Want some, Katie? We need some meat, some onions, some potatoes, and some carrots.
We haven't got any meat either. Flour. A few herbs.
A can of lemonade, please. 128 packets of biscuits. 322 loaves of bread. Pound of minced beef, please.
250 millilitres or half a pint of water.
So, we need some minced beef. And we need some carrots and some onions.